Welcome, everybody. We'll get started shortly. Okay. Welcome, everybody, to the Catholic Youth Mobilization webinar. We are really grateful you're here. My name is Kayla Jacobs. I am the Program Manager of Youth Mobilization for Catholic Climate Covenant, and we're excited to share about some of the work we've been doing with youth across the country. And today we will be focusing on the work that is being done in Boston. Before we get started, here are a couple housekeeping things to keep in mind. We are recording this webinar, and a link to the recording will be sent to everyone who registered within the next 24 to 48 hours. If you have any questions, please submit your questions to the Q&A box. And then we also have a chat box. Please remember to be respectful and civil in all chat interactions. Staff will monitor chat and take measures if civility and respect is not observed. Again, thank you all for being here. And before we get started, we will start with a prayer. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, amen. Merciful God and creator of all, we praise you for the gift of the earth, home to so many forms of life, the common home of peoples, cultures, and species. We have made it an unjust place where some consume and pollute more than others, and the poorest face the greatest impacts of climate change. Therefore, we ask you to help us achieve climate and ecological justice, that no one takes for themselves what belongs to all, that we may share the world's goods equitably and live simply, so that we may bear witness that the earth is the sister and mother of all. Help us to respect its rhythms of regeneration, so that it may sustain all living beings, both in the present and for future generations. Amen. In the name of the Father, and Son, and the Holy Spirit. Okay, thank you again, everybody. So we're just gonna hop right into it. As mentioned, my name is Kayla Jacobs, and I am Program Manager of Youth Mobilization for Catholic Climate Covenant. And I've been blessed over this past year to work with high school students all across the country, including these great people here in the webinar today. We're gonna share with you about our youth mobilization program and what it looks like in Boston, and about a recent climate summit we just hosted there, as well as a recent lobby day that we all participated in. So I'll just introduce the speakers and then we'll get started with people sharing their stories. So one speaker that we have is Erin Alexis Johnson. She is a sophomore at Fontbonne Academy and a member of our leadership team. We also have Alejandro Baez Tejeda. He is a senior at St. John's Prep, also on our leadership team in Boston. And then we also have Father Jim Corrigan, superior of the Jesuit community at Boston College High School. He has participated in our program there as an adult ally. So we will get started first with Erin Alexis.
Hi everyone. I'm Erin Alexis Johnson, and as Kayla said, I am from Boston, Massachusetts, and I'm just going to talk about like my experience with the okay with the Catholic Climate Covenant leadership team, and just like what we do. So, exactly like I want to say 1 year ago, I like wouldn't see myself doing this. Like I feel like I wasn't as passionate about climate change as I am today because just like with all the stuff going on in the world, I feel like that wasn't one of my like biggest concerns. But um as I started like hearing more stuff about climate change, I started um teaching and educating myself about the negative effects of it and like how much like how like real this is, if that makes sense, you know? So um yeah, so I was sent an email early of this school year, which was September, about joining the Catholic Climate Leadership Team. And I decided like I want to make a change in the world, so I decided to join. And ever since that September, we have been meeting twice a week, planning a what's it called? It's a summit hosted at one of our schools. This summit basically it was a youth based summit, and we had people across like a certain district of Massachusetts, and like we all came to a school and like we just discussed about climate change. We had a couple of speakers. There was a speaker who was a teacher at, I believe, BC, Boston College, and he I forgot what his major was, but he just talked about the like the weather aspect of climate change and like how specific how specific like regions, and how like if their climate is already cold, it's gonna get even more colder. And he went into the science behind that, and he like used like many different examples of that. Our second speaker um talked about climate change in our community, so Boston, Massachusetts. And if you know Boston, Massachusetts, we're known for like our extreme weather, and this winter was probably one of our warmest winters this year. So that really brought attention to people, especially people who like didn't necessarily care that much about climate change, like me last year. So um the summit went very well. A lot of people left knowing like left learning something new about climate change. And yeah, we also attended a lobby day, which is basically where a bunch of people get together and sorry, a bunch of people get together and um we all sorry we all received these packets, and just the packets contained like all these bills. And sorry, I'm blanking right now. The packet contained a bunch of bills that we had to review, and the bills just were like all climate related. Like um one of them focused mainly on the air quality, especially in like low income communities. And I chose that bill to go over. So me and a group of other people who lived in my area, we all went to the state house, I believe. No, not the state. Yeah, I can't remember, the city hall or the state house, and we got to speak to some of our state legislators, and they co-signed some bills that are probably going to be passed, meaning that um many issues that we have with like climate change that is like within our reach, that like we can change, are going like is going to be brought to people with like authority, so they're finally like listening to us. um and yeah, just overall this year has been filled with like a bunch of new experiences, and I plan to end 2024 off with at least one or two changes in my community that will help reduce or slow down climate change in from where I'm from.
Thank you, Aaron Alexis. We will now pass it on to Alejandro.
Good evening, folks. Thank you, Kayla, for the introduction. I'm a senior. St. John's Preparatory School in Danvers, Massachusetts. Originally, I'm from the Dominican Republic, but I spent most of my life here in the United States. Today, I would like to focus not just on the aspects of our summit, the products of our summit, and the lobby day, but really go through the process of what brought me here and what brought the entire team together. Um, Honestly, I personally got involved in climate justice uh, through the concept of co-liberation. I was mostly a social justice warrior for those who are disabled, like myself. I'm blind from my left eye. For racial justice in my community of Lawrence, Massachusetts, education justice in my community of Lawrence, Massachusetts, and I was acquainted with climate justice and sustainability through my school, St. John's Prep. I participated in a cultural exchange and I went to India to perform studies based on the UN's sustainability models and sustainability development goals. And so that's how I got acquainted with this type of work and really passionate about this work through this concept of collaboration. My time with the Catholic Climate Covenant came through, again, my school, St. John's Prep. One of my mentors, Matt Spearing, helped me get acquainted with this opportunity. And I decided, what the heck? Let me apply. Let's see what happens. See what happens here. And so I applied. Well, some of the things that I wanted to see is how does this type of work with this type of organization, a spiritual organization, of a religious organization, is different from work in a partisan environment. I'm also, uh, as I said, with my passion with my trip to India, I applied to the Governor's Youth Climate Council. And so I was also a part of the Governor's Youth Climate Council this year, and I'm still a part of the Governor's Youth Climate Council in Massachusetts. And I really was able to observe the differences. So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about the process. Once I got in and we had our first meeting, where everybody was a little bit shy, it was Zoom. Uh, we got acquainted with ecology and what the spirituality of climate justice really is. And I think that's the key difference when it comes to climate justice and working uh, outside of an organization like this when working with spirituality. So we learned about carbon emissions and decarbonization in school and education and curriculum through the lens of spirituality, through the lens of ecology and what it means to interact spiritually with our environment. Uh, we were able to learn from people like Dr. Father Jim Cohen and others, but also we were able to produce and execute a plan that will allow us to also learn during our summit. So we had two sessions, and students and mostly students and adult allies were able to choose from these sessions to be able to go and either uh learn from the professor from BC or learn from Eben Bine, who is a advocate and activist from Our Climate. We were able to partner from the Catholic Covenant to partner with Our Climate to be able to also give a talk about social justice, philosophically speaking. Um, with that being said, our climate, an organization that we partnered with during the year as a group that we decided to partner with, we were able to go to and participate in a lobby day where we were going to the State House and advocate for bills, priority bills before Joint Rule 10. Joint Rule 10 in Massachusetts is when bills are either going to be sent to study to die or passed for the next session. And so some of us went to our local district. Some of us joined other people's district. I know Kayla was there. She's not from Massachusetts, but she was able to be there as an adult ally and support us. And I want to end my talk and my time, and I'm probably going over with what it means to be an adult ally from the student perspective, what is useful for an adult ally to know and to keep in mind when participating in moments like these. And for me, an adult ally is someone who has done the work or is trying to do the work with the support and guidance of saying this is a two-way street. I'm here to guide you and support you to be a foundation for you, but I also want to challenge you to think deeper than me, to use your experiences that I perhaps am not having and use that to move forward. for me, that's the most important aspect of an adult ally is to say this is a two-way street. I learn from you, you learn from me, but I'll always be there to support you when you run into a wall. Sorry, Kayla, I'm sorry if I went over in my time, but yeah, there's just so much to talk about.
Awesome. Thank you, Alejandro. And now I'll pass it over to Father Jim.
Thank you, Kayla. And thank you, Aaron, Alexis, and Alejandro. Um, just maybe a word to begin on how I got involved in this. Before being here in Boston, and before this, I was in New York, but I spent a lot of time out in the islands of Micronesia in the Western Pacific. And I know a lot of people out there and former students raising their families and islands out there that are in danger of just being lost completely from rising sea levels. And I have to admit that for the longest time, I was taken in by so much of the misinformation and disinformation, coming out of the fossil fuel side of things, that the science was uncertain and, everything's going to be okay and on and on and on and on. And then really just waking up to the reality and just saying, I need to do a lot more work in this space than I have been doing. And personally, I think of former students raising their families and their kids and their grandkids, in danger of losing their land, their homes, their identity, their culture, their language, and so that's part of it. But also being from New Jersey and downtown Jersey City in Hurricane Sandy that got terribly flooded, and being here in Boston, we're quite prone to the flooding, and even here on the BC High campus, in a heavy rain and a high tide, there's flooding, and so it's a real issue. So that's how I got into some of this work. More than a year ago, one of the teachers at Notre Dame Academy had reached out, and Kayla had, or at Fanpan, and Kayla had, been in touch with him, trying to get something started here in Boston. And I just thought something I could do is to really encourage that we make Boston one of the cities that Catholic Climate Covenant was reaching out to and beginning to mobilize in. And it worked. And I was trying to count up the emails that went back and forth over that year, and there were a lot. But what came out of that was the formation of the student leadership team, and with Aaron, Alexis, with Alejandro, and other students, it was just incredibly consoling. They took the lead on this, on everything, and to have the role of adult ally. And I kind of wish I would have had that definition that Alejandro just gave, ahead of time, because I think that's kind of what I've tried to do, and just be supportive, encouraging, and helpful in whatever way. A year or so ago, many of you are maybe familiar with the Ignatian Family Teach-In for Justice that's held in Washington each year in the fall. And Bill McKibben spoke, and he spoke to this 2,000 high school and college students, and talked about what he tries to do as someone who's older and being an ally. And one of the things he said that some older people, it might be easier to do is to get arrested, and because they're not going to be messing up their careers and professions. I have to admit, I am not at that point yet. We'll see if it ever comes to that. But different ways of entering into the space, and a real consolation for me, just getting to know, the students here at BC High. 3 of those guys are on the leadership team, but also getting to know students from other schools, from St. John's Prep, from Fanpan, a couple of guys from Xaverian, and then at the summit that we hosted here at BC High, a parish youth group that came, a holy name from Wayland, and just getting that group of high school students together and watching them work, watching them absorb, what the speakers were giving, their interaction with each other, their coming to know each other, their sense that they're not alone in this work, There are others in their own schools, but also beyond their own schools. And I think that was an important part of the summit. And so we're very hopeful that that will continue to expand in the years ahead. Um, what I see as being an adult ally is just that, trying to be as supportive as I can, and using whatever skills, the talents I have, to step aside and not try to control what's going on. That's really not up to me. I'm at an age where I'm not going to suffer, the worst effects, potential effects of climate change. And so whatever way that I can give my time, to working with people like Aaron, Alexis, and Alejandro, the students here, that's certainly what I want to do. And just really grateful to Caleb and the Catholic Climate Covenant, for working with us here in Boston, to create something that wasn't going on before. And I think we got it made a good start. So I'll stop there.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. So we will open it up now for questions for our panelists. Please feel free to write your questions in the Q&A. And I'm just going to start with a should be easy question. Maybe each of you could go around and just say, like, what were your couple favorite parts of the past, like, year together in the program? Alejandro, do you want to get us started?
For sure. I think that going chronologically, I talked about the role of spirituality in the work of climate justice and how that has changed my perspective. I would say that when we went over Laudato Si and we learned about the definition of ecology through the Catholic Church perspective, transformed kind of my perspective. So I find that to be a highlight of the academia portion of this experience. I would say that the summit for me, we went a little bit off script one time. We had two sessions, as I said, an action planning, lunch, and all these activities planned. But there was a moment in time where these small discussions weren't really being fruitful. There wasn't a lot of a conversation. People were going off and, eating snacks and having other types of conversations. So Kayla went up to me and says, Alejandro, do you have any ideas on, how we can uh create more vibrancy on the spot? And so we were able to create an activity, a small thought experiment idea, moving around. And that was really fun. That was really fun. Facilitating that, participating in that, seeing the different responses. Uh, so yeah, I would say that those two are good highlights for the summit and the experience.
Aaron, Alexis, will you go next?
Could you possibly repeat what the question is?
Yeah. What were just like your favorite, like one or two favorite parts of being on part of the team or the summit or the lobby day?
One of my favorite things about being one of my favorite parts about being a part of this team was when I believe her name is Miss Gorliss, when she came in to educate us about the science behind climate change. She was very understanding when it came to the questions, and she made sure that everyone had a good understanding on just climate change in general. She gave some pretty great details and examples. Like one of them, she was telling us about. I believe this happened in 1982. I'm not actually sure. I just know that it happened during that time frame. But I don't know if you guys remember. I'm pretty sure this is a very well known fact. But back in 19 wherever, there was a global like everyone in the world had this one concern because like the ozone layer was like, I forgot what the word was. It was like breaking, I believe, because of the use of the over usage of spray cans, refrigerators, ACs, and that was a moment in time where like the whole entire world just came together and lessen their use of these specific projects. And I can't remember which organization did it, but they made an alternative for these projects. Like we all use these products today, but back like I want to say like 30 years ago, they were very dangerous to our earth. And they still are very dangerous, but they're not as dangerous. So um I believe the hole in the ozone layer was like the size of Australia. I'm not sure. But that was a very good example that she used. Well, just story that she told us. So I feel like that gave me like a lot of inspiration because um with a problem that big that's affecting everyone on earth, I really like how everyone just like got together, noticed that they like what they're doing could possibly like ruin their lives and the lives for like future generations. So that really inspired me. Another thing that I enjoyed about the leadership team is how everyone like played a role in the summit with planning the summit, whether it was just coming to support, whether it was just participating or just talking. Everyone participated, and I feel like we have a very good like foundation when it comes to like planning stuff. We had about I want to say 3 months to plan. I'm not sure. It might have been longer, but um either way, we all had a great time and I really look forward to next year.
Awesome. And Father Jim.
Just picking up where Aaron and Alexis just left off, all the decision making was in the hands of the student leadership team, and that's something that I really appreciated and enjoyed, and just being able to join some of the leadership team meetings and just to listen to what the conversation was and the concerns raised. Um, but the decision making was in the hands of the students and exactly where it ought to have been, and it really and it resulted in a really terrific, I think, day here. I mentioned we hosted it here at BC High, but it really came from the other students who decided that BC High ought to be the initial host, and so kind of really as an adult ally, just okay, let's make this work. And fortunately, kind of coincidentally, it aligned with the lobby day that both Evan, Alexis, and Alejandro mentioned. That happened a couple of days after we had the summit here, and that was a real highlight. I had no idea that's been going on for some years, but to be at the State House with about 200 primarily high school students, meeting with their reps and legislators, and with a tremendous amount of work done beforehand. That they put in, and Alejandro was in the thick of that, certainly, and watching the students in action and joining a couple of groups, of 6 or 7 students and meeting with their reps and lobbying, advocating for a variety of bills, climate-related bills, and that for me was a source of tremendous hope, and I was so grateful to have the opportunity to be part of that, and really just tagging along, and I just had to show up, and it was the students who were doing all that work in the months ahead, and on the day itself, and that was tremendous.
Awesome, thank you. I'm seeing several questions about just like the logistics, so I could just touch on that really quickly. So the team meets every other week throughout the school year. So we started in, I believe our first meeting was in probably mid-September, and will continue to meet through the end of the school year. What were the other questions? They meet over Zoom, so the only thing we really have in person is the summit and the lobby day. And if there is another project that we decide to do together, then we can make that happen as well. Those are two big main events, but it's a movement that we're trying to build, and so as things come up, we figure out as a team how we want to interact with those things. And then there was another question about how the Covenant decides where to have this program, and as Father Jim mentioned, it's quite important for us the success of the program, at least initially, really relies on really strong adult allies in a region, because students don't necessarily know us, aren't necessarily connected to us yet. So we rely a lot on the pastors, the youth ministers, the teachers who already know the students, who can invite them into the program. And so we tend to choose regions that we have really excited adult allies who will be able to get youth involved in the program. So this year was actually our first year of doing the program, first full year. And so we had it in Chicago and Boston, and kind of a version of it in Brownsville, Texas. And then next year, we will be starting it in a couple other locations as well. Still kind of to be determined. Another question that we got was that you all did a lot of amazing work here or there locally in the greater Boston area and in Massachusetts. The question is, how do you see the work that you're doing there locally connect to global issues? And whoever wants to respond to that first, maybe Alejandro, if you want to share a little bit about your time, a little bit more about your time in India and that kind of work.
For sure. So specifically before my time with the Covenant, I was privileged to participate in a cultural exchange with India, working with the United Nations Sustainability Development Goals. For me, I personally work on sustainability development goal number 11, sustainable communities and cities. Uh, we went to India um, with the mind of creating solutions for peace revolving around water and using these sustainability goals. So I was able to visit the Baulis in India, the different water systems, the ancient water systems, see the Oyama rivers, see all these different historical places that have been contaminated or have been misused by us. Also learning internationally who has the power, who owns the water, who is capable of exporting and importing the water, is quite fascinating. And I learned through this program that not only is the earth warming an issue, but geopolitically, the use of water and the reserved water and who owns the water might be, for me, a priority in terms of um, issues. I'm from the Dominican Republic, so for me, it's also a priority in to look at how I do this work here now that I'm a young adult as a teenager, and how I am going to do it when I eventually go back to my country of Dominican Republic and do the work there as well. I see the trash from the Atlantic Ocean landing in our beaches in Dominican Republic. I see landfills being built in low-income communities in the Dominican Republic. I see a lack of infrastructure to be able to take care of those landfills and garbages around the different barrios or neighborhoods in the Dominican Republic. And I can only imagine how that is in different other parts of the world. But specifically to how we do the work, I like to look at coalition building and how the work is built is done in Massachusetts. In Massachusetts, we have the MIC, or the Massachusetts Youth Climate Coalition, where different organizations like Our Climate, who we partner with for the Lobby Day, school clubs, um, different town and city clubs and organizations kind of collaborate to be able to build events like the Lobby Day that Father Jim Cronin says that goes a lot deep into preparation. So if I could really hone in and manifest that type of work that's being done in Massachusetts through the youth and collaboration and coalition building and bring that to an international scale, and especially to my home country of Dominican Republic when I'm older and I'm able to do this type of work over there.
Awesome, thank you. Does anybody else have anything to add to that question? If not, I can move on to the next one. Move on. Okay, cool. Somebody asked, what do you view your best successes were, and then why were they? What made them successful? And anybody can jump in.
If nobody has anything to add, I could go. I just don't want to monopolize the conversation if anybody else doesn't have anything
Go
to add.
for it. Go for it, Alejandro.
I would say that in terms of the summit itself that we planned, our biggest success was definitely our action planning portion. At the end of the day, after our sessions with our guest speakers and our small discussions and our active activities, we separated the groups into their organizations or schools that they came in with. So if you were a school, let's say from BC High, you would be in your BC High group. And what we did is we said, great, you learned all these different ideas, you learned from all these different people. Now let's create a plan, a reasonable, actionable plan to be able to implement in your different community, parish, congregation, or school that could go forward. And uh, it was a success, in my opinion, because we got the wheels turning. uh we were able to put all the action plans on the board and see and compare and help and advocate and give feedback. And I thought that that was great that we were able to come out the summit with tangible plans to implement in our different communities.
I'll add one thing, maybe on a more personal note for me. A kind of a personal success was staying out of the way, as an adult. And as I said before, the decision making was all done by the student leadership team. The sessions led, and Alejandro mentioned before the kind of impromptu session activity that he led. In the student evaluation of the summit, that scored very high. The students enjoyed that, learned a lot, and benefited from it. But I think a success for me it was really learning how to be an adult ally, and that was really an important thing for me. A number of people on this webinar probably that are familiar with Jesuits. I'm a Jesuit. I'm used to kind of being out in front and leading and making decisions and all that kind of stuff. And to be in a situation with to learn and say no, just step back, because they're incredibly talented, articulate, intelligent, committed, passionate, youth here, that are going to run with this and do great work with it. And really just for me to be able to step back and say, how can I support them in the work that they're doing? And I think that's a process that will continue for me, learning how to be a good ally, to the students who are involved in this work. So.
Awesome. Aaron, Alexis, do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, I, as Alejandro was saying, when he was talking about the action plan that we did, not only did that help the participants, but that also helped me. Working with people in my community opened up another way of seeing things, and I realized that not only can I teach myself about like climate change, I can also help and teach others about climate change. Um, After the summit, I went home thinking about like what can I do, and I thought of the idea of well, actually two ideas, of bringing composting to Fontbonne. My school has like a problem with knowing like which goes like if something's like recyclable, if I should put this in recycle, should put this in trash, if um like where should I put this particular piece of waste in which bin. So I feel like composting might reduce that problem, because a lot of the trash that um that is like put into like the trash bin can be composted. So especially with especially like considering the fact that we have a greenhouse, some of that compost that we might have can be used to make even more like plants and stuff like that. So that's one of the things I personally want to work on before the end of the school year. And another thing I want to do is bring a butterfly garden to our school.
Awesome, thank you. Another question we received was how do we interact with parishes and the diocese? So I can answer that question. It looks different in different regions. For instance, last weekend we had our climate summit in the Archdiocese of Chicago. And in Chicago, we worked directly with the Archdiocese as equal partners. Cardinal Supich attended our summit and celebrated Mass and had a Q&A with the students there. And then in other areas, we work more directly just with the schools, reach out to parishes, usually get like a stamp of approval from the local diocese, but it's more grassroots. And in Boston, it's a little bit more grassroots. We had most of our participation came from Catholic high schools, but as Father Jim mentioned, we also had some participation from youth groups as well. And so our doors are open to anybody who would like to work with us. And yeah, it just looks different in different regions. I saw several questions, and we get this question basically at like every webinar that we get. And Father Jim, I obviously know that you can't speak on behalf of the priesthood or all the priests, right? But people are wondering about how do we get this kind of stuff in our homilies, and just if you have any recommendations on how to cultivate those conversations with clergy to talk more about caring for God's creation. I know it's kind of like putting you on the spot, but sorry.
Oh, no, but it's such a great question, and it's such a necessary question, you know. I help at a parish north of Boston pretty much every weekend. And the congregation is very open and good and get it, and you know they talk about Laudato Si, you know, and stuff. But other parishes I'm familiar with, you know, even some of the comments that were in the chat, you know, you get all sorts of resistance, and people just I won't make a judgment, you know, but not being helpful at all. I think one thing I know, for you know, as someone who preaches regularly, I find it extremely helpful if someone talks to me about my preaching, you know, and to be able to say, and sometimes it happens, you know, so like, you know, you said these things, but I didn't hear anything about these other things. You know, this was helpful. You know, there are some people who walk out of a church, and every single time they'll say, you know, great homily, Father. And if I stood up and read the phone book, you know, and then after the mass they'd walk out and they'd say, hey, great homily, Father, you know. But just be able to talk to whoever it is and just say, here's something that I really like to hear more about, you know, from you know, during the mass, you know, in the homily. And I think that's very helpful, you know, and finding, especially in the parish, finding other folks that are like-minded and are interested in the same things, and bringing that to the pastor, you know, and it may take a while to get it going, but encouraging, I think the priest in your parish, wherever this may be, encouraging them to address these issues because they're so critically important. That's my thought, Kayla.
Awesome, thank you. And Paz did put in the chat a link to our homily helps, which you can always share with your pastor. And yeah, it's exactly what it sounds like. It helps the priest develop his homily around these kind of issues. Are there any, if you have any questions, please put them in the chat.
Kayla, can I just add something to what Father Jim was saying?
for sure.
I am, disclaimer, I am in no way would I consider myself qualified to speak on priesthood or homily giving. I wouldn't consider myself to be highly religious. I prefer the term spiritual, a spiritual person. But I will say that learning from the Dato Si in this experience in the covenant, uh, describing the issues of climate justice not as different problems, but as one complex problem. Uh, Speaking spiritually about what ecology is and how the living and the non-living interact together and how beautiful that is and how poetic that is. I could find myself personally as a student, as a young person, um, intrigued at listening about that. And I know that most movements historically have been led one way or another by religious motivation. The civil rights movement, right? Or Dr. Martin Luther King, um, more radical nationalist movements like Dr. Malcolm X. These were all priests, and so Father Jim, again, I'm not qualified to speak on that, but I just want to say that as a student, I would love to listen to the inner workings of, the philosophy of what the church is saying on Laudato Si and the social, political, economical problem being one, not many different parts of it. So I don't know if this is helpful. I just felt the need to add.
Yeah, that was very helpful. That was
Great.
awesome. Yeah. Another question came through and it says, Pope Francis said that we should encounter, so encounter each other. I would also add encounter the earth, just be present to others. So how are you planning to encourage greater encounter with your fellow Catholics? So how do you view this program as an opportunity to be in community, to encounter others? Yeah, who would like to start? Anybody could jump in.
Um, Hi. Um, I'm just gonna say that a way that well, correct me if I'm wrong, but the question's basically asking us to say like, what are we gonna do, and how are we gonna educate people on like the current climate crisis?
Yeah, go for it.
All right. So, as I mentioned earlier about the whole entire composting thing, that's one thing I want to bring attention to. But another thing I can possibly do is this is a really I think this one's pretty effective, but probably like trying to get a speaker to talk to my school, even though that's not necessarily something that I am doing, rather that's me getting someone else to do it. I feel like that is a small step to building on to even more things that I can do. Originally I wanted to start a club, like revive the green team that we used to have, but I feel as if that is just like too broad, if that makes sense. And most people at my school don't necessarily care about climate change. So if I went with something more like that touches on different topics, I know I said broad, I think I used that wrong. But if I started a club that touches on different topics, such as like a human rights club, I can incorporate climate change into that because I view the earth as a human right. We all deserve to have a nice and clean earth, and that is something that a lot of people don't necessarily understand. And I'm not necessarily saying that everyone in the whole entire world is consciously making like making decisions to hurt the earth, but we are all contributing to it in some way. Not intentionally, but we all are doing something that is contributing to climate change, such as using our cars. That emits a lot of CO2 emission, and that is very harmful towards the earth, as we all know. And not everyone can afford electric car, and some people might even argue that electric cars are worse than gas cars. So those are like some topics that I'll be touching if I somehow start up a club that will start like maybe like an advocacy club that just goes over like social justice topics. So that's one of the things I plan on doing. There's definitely more I want to do in my community, informing the fellow Catholics about just climate change in general. So that is something that is a work in progress.
I think that that's the key question. For me, I have a few strategies that I put in place, not just for climate justice, but for all types of liberation that I pursue in my life and in my calling and in my passion. Um, my biggest fear whenever I enter a space, whenever I give my 100% to something, is that what comes out of it fizzles out. I fear that we create big momentum and then it fizzles out, especially within students, especially within people from my age group. How do I combat this? And that's what I think is what the question is asking. I would say that yes, at speaking, teaching, um, advocating is great. We need to at some point start doing the work. I know I'm involved quite heavily in my school, and some of the things that our school has done is last year we were able to convince the board, more specifically my mentor, Mr. Spearing, was able to convince the board to retrofit all the lights at our school on the outside campus, and that was about a $200,000 job. And so now the board is seeing that not only are they going to get their money back within 3 years, but they're saying that they're going to save about 50% of what they were going to spend. So uh, it's doing that active work of saying there's a model out there, let's use it. Let me use a water bottle. Me myself, I come from a Latino, Latinx household, and some of the habits and norms might be traditional, and it's how can I, as a young person who might not have the power or the authority in the household, educate my family by the actions that I take. I think of another way of encountering not just the communities that we are familiar in, but also the communities that we have to step out of our own box to face. Like I said, I'm not that religious, right? I don't go to church every Sunday. At least I'm not there yet in this point in my life. But I will say that now that I have a foundation from the covenant, that I feel comfortable going into my local parishes and giving talks to these local parishes and these youth groups as a member and affiliate of the covenant and implementing composting in these different parishes in my community of Lawrence, Massachusetts. Uh, Different actions that can be taken that will not allow the fizzling out of the momentum that we build from events like the summit.
Awesome. Father Jim?
Yeah, just everything that Alejandro just said, and Aaron Alexis as well. I think Aaron Alexis was saying, just helping everyone understand this is a shared common problem that impacts everyone, all of us together, not equally, but it impacts all of us. And Alejandro's point of doing the work, and I think that's what I've been trying to do is just keep showing up. Um, I have found that to be important. You know, even I saw Kayla down in New York some months ago for the climate march down there. And just to show up. And I know friend Ludwig is on this call from the Boston Climate Covenant as well. And I think she would agree. You show up, and I see that's something that I can contribute. Um, for me, as I'll be teaching a class that's a senior theology elective next year at BC High, and it's really focused on religion and environmental change, climate change, and And one of the questions I keep on asking myself, especially working with younger people, is how do we sustain hope? How do we on what is our hope grounded as we look ahead with all of the challenges? Um, and Alejandro and Aaron Alexis both pointed out some practical things they do personally, and I try to practice that as best I can, in my own life. So it's multifaceted, and I think a big piece of it is to keep on expanding that network, and I think that's one of the benefits of the work that was done, with the youth mobilization program from Catholic Climate Covenant. It created a new network here, one that really didn't exist before, and I think in the years ahead, that network will continue to expand, student to student, and also for adults up here to see who else is trying to do this work, and staying in touch with them, and building what each other is doing. So that's my thought.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody. I am noting the time, so we're going to wrap up the webinar. As we mentioned, we have recorded this webinar and we will be emailing it out to everybody within the next couple of days. If you have any further questions, or if you're interested in potentially getting this program started in your region, please feel free to reach out to me. I did put my email in the chat. I'll say it now. It's kayla@catholicclimatecovenant.org. You can also find that on our website. Happy to have a conversation. And yes, thank you so much to our panelists, Father Jim, Alejandro, Aaron, Alexis. Really grateful that you're here tonight and sharing your story. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much. Thanks, Kayla.
Thank you all.
Thank you.